demands of our time in terms of private members' business. So all the things that Micheál Martin was promising just last week were not going to happen are now, if the government get away with it, going to happen this week. We will obviously be protesting very strongly about this. It's very interesting. I saw the reports of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael backbenchers complaining about the fact that they were sold that this is about getting extra time for backbenchers, and now they find out that big groups of Fianna Fáil backbenchers, reasonably big groups of Fine Gael backbenchers, are getting the same as a very, very small group of Michael Lowry backbenchers. I don't know, Barry Heenan is not going to be sitting beside Michael Lowry anymore, but I don't know if he's moving from the backbench, from the opposition side to the government side, but hopefully he will find a seat that is to his satisfaction. So we'll be continuing to protest. Obviously we have no confidence in the Ceann Comhairle. What happened last week was an absolute disgrace. Not only were the basic rules of parliamentary democracy subverted, but actually the rules of the Dáil were clearly, consciously subverted by the Ceann Comhairle in coordination with the government. What happened, you can listen to what happened, you can watch the video. It's very, very clear that multiple rules were broken. The first one was that a vote was called on the order of business, and that vote was not granted, contrary to the standing orders. The second one was that the amendment to the standing order was meant to be put. That's what we were meant to be voting on, but then it was deemed that we were voting on the original government standing orders. The third thing was that the Ceann Comhairle just unilaterally ripped up the pre-existing Dáil agenda. She has the right to do that in terms of she has the discretion over the questions I promised legislation, and she was able to kind of ram that through. But the thing that hasn't been discussed at all is that there was due to be a first stage bill on Tuesday, and it just disappeared without a reference. It was included in what was agreed by the Business Committee and then was just completely forgotten. So all the rules broken in order to facilitate this government ramming through their undemocratic manoeuvre. Second issue I'll raise briefly is what happened here yesterday morning. I arrived in its aftermath. Incredible treatment of mothers against genocide. We had a vigil from Mother's Day, calling on the government to implement what they promised to do during the election. For example, the Occupied Territories Bill, highlighting the massive increase in the number of weapons that are being transported through Irish airspace, and calling for support for the arms embargo bill, which will be debated in the Seanad tomorrow. And then their reward for that being faced with state repression, being forcibly removed by the Gardaí, and not just removed, but then arrested. An incredible way to treat those who are protesting against genocide, and looks as if it's part of a worldwide repression of pro-Palestinian protesters. It was reported yesterday, I'm not sure if you've seen, that 2 Irish citizens in Germany are facing deportation from Germany as a consequence of protesting for Palestine. We think that the Minister for Justice needs to make a statement about this. Is this going to be the way that Palestinian solidarity protests are treated? And then finally, just to mention that there will be a very important sleep out outside the Dáil from 2 p.m. tomorrow. This is organised by the Equality in Education campaign, made up of parents who were fighting for appropriate school places for their children this September. There's many, many hundreds of parents and children with additional needs who have no appropriate place still for September. There was a meeting with the Minister last week, various promises were made and so on, but the parents correctly feel the need to go, and these are people who have to, kids to take care of. They're going to spend the night overnight outside the Dáil to highlight the lack of appropriate school places in this country, and to bring pressure on the government to act. So we'll be participating and supporting that and voicing their calls in the Dáil.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be the first week where there's cordoned off time set aside for pro-government TDs that the opposition can't participate in. That's actually unprecedented, that there's this protected time where no voices of opposition can be raised, is something that somebody said. I think we should mark as well that we keep hearing about the Do Nothing Dáil. There was actually only 2 days that were interfered with in terms of a protest by opposition TDs. That's the first thing. But it's the government's duty to bring forward bills. Last week there was a bill, a very important one, for example, on bereaved parents. Very few backbenchers from the government. Didn't see anyone from the Lowry group, I could stand corrected, got up to speak on that. Quite an important social welfare change that's going to be brought in. So it is very hard to take it with any seriousness about their lack of opportunities to speak in the Dáil. I think as well the fact that Taoiseach's questions won't be, it'll be only once this week. I'm going to be raising, for example, as Paul already mentioned, mothers aren't normally a threat to national security, and yet they were arrested, some people with serious health conditions and so on, before they were able to collect their children from school. It was completely out of order what happened. There was remarks made to some of them about Hamas. There was remarks made to others about, well, what do you think would happen to you if you were outside the White House? Why is that being said by Gardaí? Clearly there's a line coming from the international, the imperialist countries that are clamping down on protest on Palestine. And it seems to be infiltrating the Gardaí as well. And I think it's very, very serious what happened to those women who were having a peaceful Mother's Day, giving up their Mother's Day because of the absolute slaughter that has been taking place in Palestine. 15 rescue and health workers were executed over the last few days. Their bodies have been found in a mass grave. They've links to the UN. The UN has just been completely no respect given at all by the Israeli authorities. So obviously we'll continue to raise that in the limited Taoiseach's question that we have. The last thing I want to mention is the cost of living, because a very important survey came out today showing that over half of households have engaged in risky financial behaviour in order to survive. So that means getting loans, going into credit. One of the biggest risks was electricity, and that is something that the government is going to be taking away. Another cost of living measure, it's been announced by the Minister for Higher Education that they will take away potentially the €1,000 on the third level fees. Again, that was a huge plank of the election campaign, and it's another plank that's been just taken away. The free HRT, the cost of living one-off measures, obviously the housing figures, a whole load of things. Complete change in tone now from this government, moving in a much more Thatcherite direction. So they're also things that we'll be raising with the government.
Ruth, can I just ask you about the protest outside yesterday? Some of the government TDs were critical of the opposition's criticism of the Gardaí, and they were saying that if people are blocking the gate to Leinster House, regardless of what they're protesting or who they are, they have to be moved along. They should not be allowed to sit down at the gate to Leinster House and prevent people coming in and out of Parliament. Is that a fair criticism? Usually on a Monday at 5:30 in the morning, there's not too many TDs trying to get into Leinster House. This move by the Gardaí happened at around that time. They started.
It didn't. It happened I was there. I filmed it. It happened at 8:30.
They came along and then started making moves at around that time.
So the gates open at 7:30.
Well, just a couple of things about what happened, right? The gates of Leinster House aren't sacrosanct. People are allowed to protest in front of the Parliament, without being dragged away and arrested and cautioned. They've been issued with adult cautions. Why was that necessary? I'm sure some sort of time could have been agreed. They took away pictures, which was very actually upsetting for a lot of the women, of the children who they were marking in a really careless, insensitive manner. The pillow babies, I don't know if people may have seen that the women make, that are swathed in, as a dead child would be, were kicked around by one or two Gardaí. Again, be very worried about people who behave like that, There was no need for the tone of what happened yesterday. Normally what happens with a protest, the Gardaí come along, they ask what time are you going to leave, and you negotiate something. And I find it hard to believe that Mothers Against Genocide wouldn't agree to that,
Just to add to they had agreed to leave at 11 o'clock, and they had said to the Gardaí, we're leaving at 11 o'clock in the morning.
If the gates open at 7:30 and people need to get in from 7:30, they were blocking the gates. Like last September 12 months, I know a very different protest and a very different tone of protest. But when there were protesters here blocking the gate last September 12 months ago, there was uproar.
Yeah, well, can I just say on that, there's other entrances into the Dáil around the back as well. It's not like people couldn't get in. But what's happening in the world is unprecedented. We're seeing a slaughter of people. So you want polite, silent protests that are completely ineffective. People have to protest. In my view, there should be strikes about what's happening. You know, the trade unions should not be cooperating with what's happening. Flights are taking place, it's been reported this week, that aren't even being checked, and that's increased in numbers. So this state is complicit, potentially, in the genocide that's taken place, and people are entitled to protest.
Paul, can I just ask you, Rhoda Murphy is going to survive the vote of confidence. What's next? What's the next plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's likely that she's going to survive the vote of no confidence. It's obviously unprecedented for a Ceann Comhairle to face a vote and win it on the basis of just the government voting to keep you in. So it's going to be clear that she has no confidence from anyone on the opposition side of the House, apart from the kind of extension of the government that sits on the opposition side of the House in terms of the Lowry group. But I don't think anyone from the actual opposition parties and groups are going to vote confidence in her. So it is unprecedented that she would continue in those circumstances, clearly being a Ceann Comhairle, not for the Dáil as a whole, but for the government. If she wins the vote, as I agree is likely, it doesn't mean that I then have confidence in her, or our group has confidence in her, or the opposition has confidence in her. You know, you can't expect
over?
us.
Can we form committees? Can we move on?
We can form committees. Yesterday, we're always in favour of forming the committees. The committees are not a problem. I've said this multiple times. The government keeps trotting out a line that we are the obstacle to the formation of committees. We're not the obstacle to the formation of committees at all. So we absolutely can move on in terms of that. But we still are not going to accept this blurring of the lines between government and opposition, this facilitation of the Lowry group, the cutting of the opposition time, and we will be finding ways to continue our protest, to continue to object. Just to make the point on the formation of the committee. So again, I could prove to be wrong to be this. I could prove to be support saving the school. I could prove to be wrongly suspicious of the government's motives, but I think the delay on the formation of the committees is because they want to get the Lowry group. It is because they want to get the Lowry group to take opposition committee places rather than government committee places. So again, at the business committee last week, it was mentioned that in order to get the committees up and running, we're going to have a Dáil reform committee first. That doesn't make sense. That isn't what happens. What happens is that the business committee meets as the committee of selection, and it's done. So again, that suggests to me that there is going to be an attempt to get the Lowry group into the opposition slots in the committees. But let's see if that's what comes. If it is, that's another real affront to the way the Dáil is meant to function, and will be the subject of further protests.
Are you going to disrupt the new speaking staff of the Dáil when Michael Lowry is happening this week?
We're going to consider exactly what we do between ourselves and discussing with the other groups, and work out what the most effective way of continuing the protest is.
And you should say that a line has been crossed here, a new precedent has been set in the Dáil that can't be gone back on. What do you say to that?
I agree, a line has been crossed. The line of the division between government and opposition, and the leaders' questions, exists to enable the opposition to ask questions of the government. That line has been crossed by the government by facilitating Lowry and now government backbenchers. Another line was crossed in terms of the way the Ceann Comhairle behaved in clear collusion with the government. They've tried to deny it. It was clear to anyone who was watching on the day this was a preordained plan to ram it through. So yeah, I think lines have been crossed.
Is it possible she was inexperienced rather than clearly colluding, as you said there?
No, I don't think so. I think it was clear to me sitting in there. It became clear to me that what was going to unfold, that they had a plan. They knew there would be some level of disruption. Then they would ram through the order of business, and then they'd come back, regroup, ram through the standing orders, and then suspend for the day. That was clear, and then that is what actually played out. So to me, it looks clearly a preordained plan.
Have you heard anything from the Ceann Comhairle or the Oireachtas about taking the video in the chamber? Do you anticipate you will?
I got an email from someone in the Oireachtas just asking me to take it down. I didn't take it down, no.
Will the Ceann Comhairle be chairing the debate on confidence in her today?
I would doubt it, but I don't know.
Do you think it will be?
No, but I presume she won't. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I presume it would be pretty strange for her to do it.